Hey, what's up, YouTube? This is EV Comics, and welcome back to another glorious indie comic review day. Now, I have been anticipating this one for quite a while because I am a fan of Chuck Dixon. And as you've seen in my previous videos on the channel, I have reviewed a lot of Rippaverse comics. I got into them because I was excited about the idea of a pretty big size company, putting a lot of money into their comics and actually trying to make something to potentially, maybe in the future, rival Marvel and DC. And obviously, they're not quite there yet, but they are still making loads of money because they're making $800,000 on this campaign. Now, it's not the $3 million that ISOM raked in, but you got to remember that ISOM was like a big news thing at the time. Even Fox News covered it and everything. Of course, it's going to be overinflated, that first one. Now, the second one still made, I believe it was $2.5 million. ISOM 2 still carried a lot of stuff. Alpha Core came in with, I think it was over $1 million. Yaira was over $1 million. Gooding was the first comic that wasn't done in the campaign format, so it was a little bit different how they ran it. And overall, that one I think made, what was it? It was $600,000, which is still, it's not $1 million, but it's still quite a bit of money. It's doing a lot more than a lot of other indie comics for sure. And then they've kind of kept up the train going here with Horseman. Now, Gooding, I gave my thoughts on it. I still think overall, even in retrospect, I think it was still a pretty good comic. I enjoyed it. I thought the story was pretty good. It was just definitely, there was a pacing issue because of the type of story it was. But this is not having the same problems that Gooding has. It's not trying to tell too much in too little time. This tells everything it needs to without going over the top with information or whatever. It feels very natural. And this is the Horseman. Now, there's a couple things I want to talk about before I actually get to reviewing the writing, which is mainly what I like to review on here. I don't so much talk about artwork because I just think it's so subjective. Some people will hate this. Some people will like the way it looks. As for me, Joe Bennett is an excellent artist. Fantastic work in Alpha Core and good work in here. But there are a few things that are a little crazy to me, such as... let's go ahead and talk about this artwork. Now, you might not notice anything wrong with this artwork just by looking at it, but it's because whoever was doing the marketing put the "It's the Final Day" in front of a very specific spot, and that's the hand, because, my God, what happened here? Now, what I think this is supposed to be is his hand resting over top his other hand. I think that's what it's supposed to be. And if you look at it like that, it makes sense. But good Lord, did something get screwed up here? I can't, looking at this, it's like they're just sort of fused together. And it just makes it look awful. It just looks terrible. I have no idea how this happened. Kanan was hired to be a sort of art editor, sort of someone to look at this and say, hey, maybe fix this or maybe do this. How did this image, after everyone looked at it, Joe Bennett, the colorist, which I think is on here somewhere. Where is it? Yeah, the colorist, Jay Brown, the inker Fabio Jansen, and then lead art director Kanan White, and the editor in chief Eric July. How did all of you people look at this and not see something wrong with it? I thought Kanan being hired was supposed to fix this. Now look, this is bad, but it's not indicative of the whole comic. And I think that's what a lot of people are saying. They're looking at this and they're looking at another panel, which I actually commented on. This guy deleted his original post, but he didn't delete all the comments. He's talking about how this is $800,000 for this piece of crap. And he's talking about this face here. This face on, what's her name? I forgot her name. Dang it. This is the second time I've forgotten her name, I think. But her face here is being critiqued. And I have that page. I can pull it up right here. Let me find it. Yep. That page is right here. Now, I'm not going to show you a whole bunch of stuff. I got a bunch of bookmarks in here so I can know where to go. I'm not going to show you a whole lot because I don't want to get in trouble or anything. Plus, you should experience this for yourself, I think. But there's what the guy what Vincenzo C fails to get across here is that this is a corner panel in a page that's got like, you know, 4 other panels besides itself. And she is not drawn super large in the panel. Do you expect, I'm just saying, do you expect artists to draw extreme detail of the eyes, of the musculature, of the outfit stuff? Do you expect them to draw extreme detail on small drawings like this? Because in another style, like in my art style, it's very cartoony, the eyes are much larger. I would have drawn the eyes fully there. If this was me drawing this in my style, I would have drawn the eyes fully. But this is different. This is obviously going for a more realism kind of comic style, right? And the proportions are fairly, you know, fairly realistic. Everything about it, the facial structure is very realistic, and overall, it wouldn't make sense to draw her eyes super detailed here, in my opinion. I don't see, as an artist myself, I don't see the point in drawing that much detail in the eyes when she's just in a small panel and not the largest focus of the screen. There's many other characters and stuff, and you know, look at Hector, the Horseman here, and his eyes are colored in. That's because 1, he's closer to the camera, the quote-unquote camera, and 2, he's the main focus of this story. He's supposed to have a little more detail, in my opinion. But even in this panel, if you notice, even in this panel, his eyes are not detailed drawn here either. And it's because he's even farther away from the camera, so to speak. And all this, you know, it just doesn't really make sense to draw someone's eyes fully to like extreme detail in this kind of shot. And it's just, and the guy, you know, who screenshot that, Vincenzo C, I asked him if it was just you know, how zoomed out is this? Could you show more of the page? He didn't show the full page. He only showed like the top corner. And maybe he did this by accident, or maybe he did this maliciously to make it look worse. But I thought it was a page of 4 panels. But come to find out, there's a 5th panel down here that's much larger and has much more detail. And overall, it's just, I don't think there's a good reason to draw extreme detail of eyes for a shot that small. I think it's over critiquing. I think it's way over the top criticizing here, because every other page, besides the messed up hand, and there's another messed up hand that looks a little weird with the thumb when he's holding a cup. But besides those 2, I did not see anything glaringly weird like that hand in this picture here. I did not see anything else glaringly strange in this. And yeah, I'm not saying that it's okay for them to make this mistake. Obviously, with this many people working on the book, this should have never happened. You know, for me, I'm a solo artist and stuff. If this happens, I'm like, okay, I'm one dude, but I will make sure not to let this happen again. And I you know, I give this to other people to look at, and not necessarily professional editors, but friends in the art community that I have to look over my comic and stuff to try and, like, you know, criticize it or anything like that, so I can fix things. And it's overall, it's like, you know, it would be more acceptable for someone like me or like another solo artist to make a mistake like this. But for a company with this much money invested into it, with this much, you know, star artist on board, and writers and everything, like, this should have never happened. I'm not excusing this at all. This is absurd. But that is what I wanted to get out of the way. I wanted to get the criticism of the artwork out of the way. Other than this one extreme error, The Horseman is a very well drawn and very, I would say at times, like, beautiful comic, especially the full page artworks. Everything is so good. I've got some notes over here to help me not ramble because I've already gone past 9 minutes. The full page action shots are just gorgeous. There's a good mix of page variety as well. It's not just like, you know, 5 or, you know, 4 to 6 squares with art in them. There's a lot of variety with this. You know, you do have some pages like the one I showed you where it had 4, you know, those 4 squares, but then at the bottom it had a bit more of a dynamic shot where, like, the characters are kind of like, the scenes are sort of blending in with each other. And sometimes it looks great and sometimes it looks but for the most part, I think it looks really, really good. The action, all the posing, I think looks really good. It's a very, very good, very high detail comic, and it's something that like if I could ever reach that level of detail consistently, if I had the time to rather, I would love to do stuff like this because it looks great. But enough about the art. Let's talk about the story because that's ultimately, art, something can look good. It's like the Transformers movies. They look amazing, but do they have a story to make them, equally praised? Do they have something to make them remembered by other than the cool visuals? For Transformers, for the most of the movies, that's a no. But for this comic, I would say yes because the Horseman, aka Hector Caballero, excuse me, is a very flawed and interesting character. I think he's pretty great. Definitely some Punisher vibes. Obviously, Chuck Dixon, there would be Punisher vibes. But I don't necessarily think that this is just a clone of the Punisher. Maybe some people will have that criticism, but I don't think that's the case at all because their motivations are very different. So at first, it kind of starts off as like vengeance, right? Whereas the Punisher, he loses his family and goes on a killing spree of criminals because of every criminal that was involved in the death of him, the death of his family. And in the comics, different takes on the character and stuff like that. But in the show that came out, which was really good, and his appearances in Daredevil as well, pretty true to the character, right? And but he's not quite the same thing as the Punisher because it starts off kind of like that, right? His brother-in-law was killed, and his sister was crippled while she was pregnant with her husband's son. And at this point, this guy, Hector, who's ex-military, furious about this, goes out to start, basically punching criminals as a way of getting some kind of vengeance. He doesn't know who did it. He doesn't know if it's possible that he's never seen them, the criminals who killed his brother-in-law and crippled his sister. He doesn't know if he's ever met them. He could have killed them. He has no idea. And that sort of almost reminds me a little bit of Batman, how Batman usually never solves the crime of his parents, right? And he never solves like who killed his parents, right? In most takes. In other takes he does. But often that's what that kind of reminded me of the Horseman here. And at some point it stops being about vengeance and it starts being his motivation for doing the things he does begins to focus on money, on providing money for his sister and his nephew, who is like maybe 8 years old at this point. 6 to 8 maybe. I don't know. I can't really tell an age on him. But that's not a criticism of the artwork. It's just hard to tell sometimes with kid characters. But the main thing with this, I think, is really interesting is that this guy is again, he's beating up criminals. He's kind of ruining their operations, but he's taking money, and that money is made off of drugs or some other kind of like criminal deals. It might even be stolen money from other people that did not deserve to be stolen from, right? And there's definitely some criticism of his actions here to take the money. And this is why you don't see most hero characters like, Superman or Batman taking money from the criminals that they beat up, is because that money is often not even theirs to begin with, right? It's not earned by them in the first place. You saw a little bit of this with Young Justice. There was a Red Arrow whenever he was going out solo and didn't really know what he was doing with his life. He had like a kind of a crisis, and he was stealing money from the criminals. He was beaten up, and that was kind of seen as a morally bad thing to do. And you can make a case for that for sure. I'll make a case for it. But in this case, it's a pretty good motivation. He's not doing it selfishly just for himself, unlike Red Arrow in that show. He's doing it to provide for his crippled sister and nephew. And I think that puts him more on the hero side than, morally gray or anti-hero. I guess maybe he's an anti-hero because, yeah, he definitely is, because he's doing bad things, but he's a good guy, and he overall does more good than bad. I would put him on anti-hero for sure. Kind of like Punisher, right? Punisher is an anti-hero because he kills. And similar in that case, like Horseman kind of lines up there perfectly. But yeah, I think it's a good motivation, and I think it sets him up. Like, he's not just doing this for some sort of justice. He's not just doing this for because he has nothing better to do. He has a good reason to be doing the things he's doing, and I think that makes him compelling. Because, most people can relate to wanting to provide for their family, right? Most people can relate to that. If you don't have a family yet, you will. Most likely, and you will be able to relate to that feeling of wanting to provide for them, right? It makes him very relatable, makes him very very human, right? Very human. And his major flaw is that he's a little too ambitious. Sometimes he does things like he thinks about it, like he thinks about the idea of how to break in and get out of there alive. He's very smart and tactical with like how he does things, and you get to hear his sort of inner monologue as he's doing it. Like it's set up as like an after action report, like he's writing it down like a diary, and I think that's pretty good. I think that's a good way to have that, get to know the character, how the character thinks and everything. Is it like, is it just talking, right? Is it exposition? Yes, but it's not done in a boring way. It's done in a way like you're seeing the action as he's talking about it and getting into his mindset of how he's thinking during these scenes. And I find them more often than not entertaining and interesting for the character's psyche, right? Welcome to Florispark is actually a good subtitle. I was kind of wondering why we have Welcome to Florispark after having 4 comics set in the city, right? Well, why would we need another comic to welcome us to the city? But it's actually him. He is being welcomed to Florispark because he got some heat up north. Cold joke, I guess there. He got some heat up north and he needed to move down to somewhere else entirely different so he could not have people coming after him, or worse yet, his family. So he goes to Florispark, and he's like, I'm gonna do this one heist. I'm gonna get a lot of money, and then I'm gonna quit. And it's going to be enough to set us for a year, and then maybe in a year's time, if we need more money, I hit another big drug bust and take all that money too. And that's what I think is interesting about this guy, is that he actually seems to know when to quit. Now, do I think he would have actually quit? No, I think he's just kind of compelled to keep punching criminals. I think he's got some things he needs to work out for sure. But the idea is presented that he can quit, or that he knows when to quit. And at the comic especially, it seems like he knows when to quit, but eventually kind of has the idea that he will return to being the Horseman at some point. But did I mention this was a spoiler-filled comic review? I'll put that in the title. But yeah, it's a pretty good, I think, moment for him compared to a lot of other heroes and anti-heroes, is that they don't really know when to quit. And it's kind of interesting for, spoilers for the Punisher show, but at the end of season 1, he's alive. He's done everything that, he's felt compelled to do. He's avenged his family all the way through. And now it's like, what do I do now? And it's interesting to think about, someone like the Punisher moving on. And this is good, because this is even better because he can move on with his family, right? He's got his sister and his nephew to take care of. He's got all the money he needs to do it and all that. And he no longer has to do that. He can just get a regular job, and he can do that and have his sister's mind at ease. And I will critique Patty, his sister. She kind of just says, don't you go fighting bad guys again. And he's like, okay, I won't. She says, okay, good. And it kind of feels like, I won't say necessarily rushed, but it does kind of feel like she's trusting that a little too much. And the scene where her and her nephew are on a bus, skipping town for a little while because things might go bad. It seems like she's sort of disheartened. Like, she did trust him. She did kind of trust him to quit, but should have known better. And it seems a little solemn, so maybe that was intentional, right? Maybe it was intentional to make her seem like, oh, she has so much trust in her brother, and then it gets kind of betrayed again, and it's it's a little sad, but ultimately everything kind of works out. But it wouldn't have if not for the inclusion of some other characters, which I'll get to in a minute. Sticking to my notes here, when they're entering Florspark, though, I am 99% sure. You know what? No, I'm 100% sure Eric July personally added the line about the country of Texas not having income tax. I think the comics are fairly apolitical for the most part, but he's definitely letting some libertarian stuff get in there, man. He's definitely putting some not so subtle libertarian ideas in there. And, he's the comic creator, he can do that, but the whole point of this was to say we're not going to get into politics. And I guess for world building's sake, I'll give it a pass, but, it just seems a little bit like, I don't know. It just seems a little ham-fisted, if you will. Not really a reason to put that line in there unnecessarily, The part about Texas being warmer, yeah, that's perfectly fine. That makes sense. I mean, that's just talking about the natural, area. But that no income tax line definitely kind of reads like a libertarian's fever dream, right? But anyway, the story is well paced throughout the entire comic. It's not like my previous review with Gooding was that it was a bit too fast, and then with Yaira as well, the pacing was too fast. This felt very comfortable. This felt very not fast, not slow, very comfortable all the way through. Did not have a problem with pacing at all. The Crooked Cops. I read one of their voices to be Samuel L. Jackson in my head, and that made him a lot more enjoyable. Maybe that's subjective though. But I thought the character was pretty good. Good introduction for he's in Florspark. He makes this bust and he says, "Yeah, I've got all this money. I never had to do another bust for a whole another year. I'm good." And then the cops show up and be like, "Hey, we're taking 2/3 of this, and you're gonna keep hitting these drug warehouses. You're gonna keep doing it, buddy. We're partners now." And they know his name and everything. They figured out who he is and all that. And I do have to ask, in the beginning of the comic, on this page here, this full page art, beautiful again. Like I said, he's got this green and blue armor, and then as he moves into Florspark, he's got the blue and the gold armor. And I had to wonder where he got it from, because it never really talks about where he got that armor from. I think logically, maybe he's like, I'm going to use a different color scheme, different look of the armor to make sure that the people up north don't know I'm down here. They'll think it's just a different person potentially. Logically, I think that makes sense. Never really explained, but I can assume off of it. I don't need everything explained to me. I can, the fan base thrives in theory crafting, right? But where did he get it from? That's where I'm just kind of like, and maybe I'll scroll through this a little bit and look, but there's one page where he's talking to his sister, and then the next page he's like, I'm going out, I'm prowling the city, and he's in the new armor. There's nothing really here saying where he got that armor from, and I just had to ask that question. Maybe that will get answered at some point, but it's not answered in this book, I'll tell you that. And that is a little bit of a plot hole, I guess, but it's not big enough to make me say the book is bad for sure. It's not like a huge plot hole. It's just like, where did he get it from? Does he have a backup one that he's just been cooking up for a while and just hasn't been using? Maybe this is his summer outfit and the one he's wearing at the beginning is his winter outfit. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. But in that case, why not just wear the same helmet? Again, I'm fine with the explanation that I've thought of, that he didn't want to look the exact same so people wouldn't come hunting him down. But I don't know. Nothing gets confirmed. But yeah, the Crooked Cops are pretty interesting. They're working for this guy named Tuna, big old dude. Kind of makes me think of the guy from Spawn. He sounds like this, man. He's talking like this. And then people were criticizing the voice actor in the trailer for the animated trailer for this comic. And I'm like, dude, have you not watched Spawn? That's almost exactly how he sounds. And people are fine. People love Spawn. I've never heard anyone say anything bad about that voice actor. So it's like, you can say the voice is goofy. Sure, that's fine. People can have goofy voices. I don't know. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Again, I think a lot of the criticism for a lot of Rippaverse stuff is very forced. Some of it is definitely warranted. Trust me, I've made some warranted criticism myself. But I'm not the one to over criticize something just because I don't like the people involved, right? But yeah, so the cops are double crossing Tuna, and then Tuna's like, "Hey, I'm gonna hire these two guys who are apparently some type of Nazis." This Nazi lover duo. That probably got the video age restricted, but they're German bad guys. God, I hate YouTube so much. Death, died. I'm not saying unalive. Screw you. Anyway, but the whole dynamic with that is very interesting because it's building up to the idea that, like, Tuna is so desperate to find an answer for the Horseman that he goes to literal Nazis and then and then basically gets all the other gangs severely crippled by, like, those two just going in and killing all of them. And it makes you wonder, how are they doing this? How are these two going through and slaughtering all these people so easily? And then the final fight, it's very I think it's very well earned and cathartic to see that they have superpowers. They are Excepts, known as superpower people in this universe are called Excepts. And it's a very, very good fight. It leads up very well. The two dirty cops get killed in the crossfire, and it's like, it's a very good, it deserved for them, right? Deserved. They're bad people. I think we could say those deaths were kind of deserved. And then the Sturm and Blitz are the name of the duo. Sturm has this sort of magnet power, which, again, nothing super original, but it is very cool to see him stop the bullets from flying at him and sending them back and killing the dirty cops. Like, it's, oh, what a cool moment that was. I was like, oh, that's how they just effortlessly gutted the gangs. That's how they did it. Every time they started firing at him, they just started shooting back with their own bullets. It's a cool visual for sure. It's a very cool moment whenever that happens. The visual of the bullets flying is just, it's so good. And then the girl Blitz is super strong, super caked up as well, but we must stay focused, brothers. She's a hothead. She is like, as soon as Horseman gets a hit on her, she's like, I'm gonna kill him. No, you stay back. I'll kill him. And their dysfunctionality between the couple is what allows Horseman to get a few hits in, right? He kind of uses that to his advantage, and the final fight takes place in a bowling alley. It's very, very effective with, like, using the location for the fight. For instance, like, the bowling balls. Horseman chucks bowling balls at the duo and starts smashing their heads with it and everything. Like, it's very, very useful of the location. It's very smartly written for the final fight scene to be held. The characters, Sturm and Blitz, nothing too deep. They don't have any kind of, like, deep character moments or anything like that. They're nothing personal to Horseman, but they are just great villains that do survive by the end of it. They're arrested by the Alpha Corps. And I would love to see them again in the future. I would love to see, like, who are they an arch nemesis of someone else, or will they be the Horseman's arch nemesis from now on? That I think is what I'm interested in. And ultimately, speaking of Alpha Corps, they are the glue of the Rippaverse. I've said this before, like, they are in literally every single book they make an appearance, whether small or large. And in here, they make another pretty large appearance. In fact, Braxwell is the only reason why Hector is alive in the first place. He would have died from that fight because he is just a normal dude fighting two superheroes, though he held his own pretty well. It's the Alpha Corps, listening in on the investigation of everything that's going on. The Horseman's different hits and everything, of the gangs and everything. The Alpha Corps is kind of catching up to it and everything. And by the time they catch up, just in time for them to save Hector here. And that didn't feel cheap. It didn't feel lame to me. I felt like that was a pretty good timing for it. I wasn't like, oh, of course they show up to save the day just in time. It didn't feel like it came out of nowhere, right? It was set up beforehand, set up and payoff. I thought it worked pretty well. Something else I forgot. There's something with the artwork as well, where there's a scene where you're looking through the eyes of the helmet, the mask of Horseman, which is very good. I love that perspective. That's so cool. There's 2 pages of that, or 2 panels in the page of that, which looks really good. The before and after of something else going on through his eyes. Looks really cool. There's a moment where you see a reflection of a scared gangster in his helmet, which also looks really sick. I love that a lot. And the idea that his helmet is metal too, he can like headbutt people. I like his design. I wasn't sure about it the first time I saw it. Like this cover, honestly, this cover I think kind of makes the mask look a little strange the first time I saw it. But seeing it on, like actually in my hands, and seeing it on other pages at different angles, the mask looks perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it at all. I think a lot of the criticism when it was first revealed was I think it's just because we couldn't see different angles of it. But now that I know how it looks, the cover looks fine to me. Some people were thinking it was like a horse's head sticking out like this, and yeah, that would have looked goofy. But it definitely is not that in this comic at all. But besides that, I mean, there's not just the Alpha Corps appearing in here. There's also Michael and Lillian, which were the antagonists of the Alpha Corps issue number 1. They seem to have their hooks in every part of the criminal underworld. They kill off Tuna at the end of this because I guess he messed up too much, and it's really cool to see the fluidity, the perfect, kind of cohesiveness of the story that Chuck Dixon is writing with his books. Alpha Corps and Horseman feels very connected, and I would say they feel more connected than Yaira, ISOM 1 and 2, Gooding. Those are all telling like their own stories in their own pockets of the world, whereas Horseman and Alpha Corps feel very married together. And I think that's obviously is because Chuck Dixon is writing both. But I think that's what I'm really looking for in the Rippaverse, is something like this, something where it's more so focused on this one kind of area, I guess, because there's Darren Fontano in ISOM number 1. Does he have any connection to Michael and Lillian? Is there any kind of connection between them? Is he working for them? I don't think they're working for him. Are they rivals? That's what's interesting to me, and I feel like ISOM 2, especially the story-wise, was just disappointing for me because it didn't follow up on that too much, and I wanted it to. It doesn't feel like it's telling a complete story with it, and that's my main critique for ISOM number 2. Though it has its good points, that's like my main critique about it, is that it didn't feel very connected to the previous book. But this, Horseman and Alpha Corps, are very much connected. But yeah, the ending felt pretty good. Overall, I like where it ends. It's like, he's done being Horseman for now, but he might return, and maybe that's what the animated series, if that ever gets made, maybe that's what the animated series will tell the story of, or maybe it's a prequel. And then you've got potential comics in the future. Horseman issue number 2 potentially coming about. Because obviously this one is a little more successful than Gooding, right? I could see this totally becoming a multi-part series like ISOM and Alpha Corps, and probably Yaira too. Actually, definitely Yaira. I think they've already talked about issue number 2. But yeah, the ending felt great. I like the ending of it. Felt pretty good. Again, the character is decently flawed. Has some depth to him. Has some good motivation. I don't really have much criticism for the character of Horseman. I think he's pretty well written. And when it comes to the dialogue, typical Rippaverse dialogue, there's a lot of "I'll break you" or "you are nothing to me" type of dialogue. You know what I mean? Where it's like, it's very edgy. It's like it's just like a lot of insults. Like it's just a lot of insults that mean nothing. And I thought about this whenever I was writing this bullet point. And it's like this. In my comic Little Miss Steel issue 2, there's a line that Stonehold says when he's fighting Little Miss Steel, and that's "you're nothing but a cheap knockoff." And that is not meaningless. That's not just saying like, "Oh, I'm bigger than you." It's not like that, right? It means something because Little Miss Steel is trying to combine half of her mother's power that she has, and the gadgets that her father uses. She's basically like a knockoff of both of her parents. And when Stonehold says that, it means something because it makes her feel less. It makes her feel lesser, right? And it's not just like, I'm going to slice your head off or something like that, which is like, for as simple-minded villains as, Blitz and Sturm are, I guess it works. But most most villains so far in the Rippaverse have been very shallow, kind of just bad guys, with not too much really to give. The only ones that are vaguely interesting are Michael and Lillian, Darren Fontano, and Magus Numite, which died in Yaira #1. So I mean, like this, most of it is like most of the villains are very one note, and I think eventually we're going to lead to a more complex villain, as the Rippaverse continues. But I just don't, there's not really much substance when it comes to the villains of the multiple series at this point. And hopefully that'll change. But for this book, I don't think it's necessarily a problem. But for a lot of the books to be this way, it does just kind of come off as, just not as interesting to me. I want a little bit something more. I want a little bit more depth to it. I don't know. That's just me personally, though. But overall, another great comic from Chuck Dixon and Joe Bennett. These guys know what they're doing. Now, there's another comic that they're working on that's like a space, fantasy-themed main character. And I'm just not really looking for galactic, cosmic. I'm not looking for anything like that from the Rippaverse. I want to see more of what they're cooking up on Earth. I want to see more about that than I do anything else. But maybe, as long as that story, that the cosmic side of the Rippaverse storytelling is its own thing, and Flora Spark and everything going on Earth is its own thing, I'll be fine with it. Eventually, it would be foolish of me to believe that they would never eventually cross over. I just don't want them to cross over immediately, because if you expand the scope to space and the multiple galaxies in the universe or whatever, it makes it hard for me to care about the small town, or not the small town, but the city of Flora Spark. In comparison, is very small compared to the vastness of space. I want to care about this. I want to care about the characters already introduced so far. I don't care about what's going on in the libertarian galaxy. You know what I mean? Like, I want to see what's happening here. But yeah, that overall, this comic, really good though. Really good. Joe Bennett and Chuck Dixon are easily the best part of the Rippaverse. I would give this a solid 8 out of 10. Mostly because that hand error is egregious. I have to dock it a few points for that. But overall, I thought the story was pretty good. I thought the characters were pretty good. And I enjoyed my time reading it. So, with all that being said, 8 out of 10. Definitely really good comic. Could have been a 9 out of 10 if it weren't for that hand. and a few other minor things. But overall, like, I love the art. I love the writing. I love the characters. And I love the action, man. The action was really, really good. Really great. But yeah, up next, I'm not reading Bloodruth. I'm sorry. I've not ordered it. I'm not going to order it. I'm not interested in anything the Saskas do, because I thought Yaira was completely terrible. It has few redeeming qualities, and there's a lot of ways that it could have been done better. In fact, Von Klaus from Rise Again Comics did a fixing Yaira video, and I thought he did a much better job with that. Of course, he has the benefit of hindsight as an editor, so to speak, instead of someone making up the story from scratch. But he does his own comics. People like him. Clearly, he knows what he's talking about a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I'm really, when it comes to the Rippaverse at this point, I'm only really looking forward, because Gooding was a one-time thing. Horseman, right now anyway, is a one-time thing. I'm really only looking forward to Alpha Core 2 and ISOM 3, just to finish off the trilogy, because I'm already 2 books in. I might as well get the third one of the Ill-Advised arc. And that's really it as far as like what I'm really interested in the Rippaverse right now. So I'm not interested in Yaira, not interested in Bloodruth because the Saskas are writing it. If it had someone else on the writing for that book, maybe I would have been interested in it. But because Bloodruth is an interesting character, I like her design, I like her power. It's very cool, very fantasy like. But I can't get burned again, man. But that's really all I got for this video. So thanks so much for watching. What did you think of the Horseman? Leave your comments down below. I'm sure it's going to be fully civilized and not a lot of people pointing fingers at me and saying that I'm a detractor and a hater because I criticized this book for a few things. Anyways, please be civil and let's talk about it. Let's talk about the comic. Till next time, read Little Miss Steel 2. It's going to be out Friday on Webtoon and Global Comics. Till next time, peace out.